Hey guys, we'll get started in just 1 minute, but I wanted to give you some good news. We've got our Worship and Creative Conference coming up in October, the 23rd to the 25th, and you can join us online. So as a thank you to you, our podcast listeners, for being with us on the journey, we wanted to give you a discount, 20% off the whole online conference. Go to hillsong.com/WCC and use the promo code podcast19. And now let's roll the intro.
This is the Hillsong Creative Podcast, where we hear from creative experts, influencers, dreamers, and doers, what they've learned and what we can learn from their journey as we explore, respond, and create.
This is Cass Langton, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm so excited for this one, and I hope you are too. Hey, if you're new here, welcome. It's so great that you've joined us. Hit the subscribe button and become part of this community. We've got this growing group of people that are exploring faith and creativity and the arts and church and how it all mixes together and how we can outwork living for Jesus in this unique kind of creative way. I'd love it if you're with us in this journey and you've been here for a bit. I'd love it if you'd let us know by giving us a rating on iTunes or writing a review. It's always great to hear what you love about the podcast, what you'd like us to cover, and it's just great to hear from you. So head over there and do that. Hey, guess what? We are only 2 months away from our Worship and Creative Conference. So if you'd like to come to Sydney, if you'd like to be a part of it, I would suggest getting in quick because we only have a few registrations left. You can go to hillsong.com/WCC to get all the information, to find out about it. But I would suggest doing that now. You won't regret it. It's going to be awesome. Hey, on today's episode, we have the one and only Joel Houston from Hillsong United. This is the first time that Joel's been on the podcast. We've had some of the other United team. Taya's been on a few times, and JD, Matt Crocker was on. Go back and check out those episodes if you want to. But we are talking, it's myself at Hillsong Conference with Joel. We're talking on the Hillsong Backstage program. It was a live interview we did. Lots of noise in the background, lots going on. But he and I had this great conversation about some of the songs from the People album, my memory of the recording, which happened at the Worship and Creative Conference, and also just where Joel's at and where the tour's at, and a little bit of a sneak peek into the future of United maybe. He hints at a few things. I don't know. I don't want to say too much. Let's jump into the interview and you can check it out. I was thinking about November last year, worship conference at the Hills campus, and I had high expectations because it was the Midnight Massive kind of moment, and I was ready for God to speak or do something just to move and to worship. But I wasn't exactly sure what was going to happen because we were recording the People album, and so you jump up, and I thought you'd go this way, and you went that way. Do you remember like that moment of when it all began, the recording?
Vaguely.
Right.
Yeah, it's a bit of a blur.
Because normally we would plan those moments, generally speaking, and you start with a bang or whatever, something to grab people's attention, get the people going and focus in the right direction. And it wasn't that moment. You sat down and it was a pretty quiet moment, and it was not necessarily what you'd call perfect.
Certainly wasn't perfect.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Because I think what it did is it arrested people's attention, certainly mine, in a way that was just unusual. Sometimes you can get into the rut of doing church and singing songs, and yeah, we did that, but we didn't start in the normal direction.
Yeah, I don't know. There was something. It's bad because I'm just trying to remember. I mean, so much has happened even since then. But I wasn't there at the Midnight Massive the year before, so I didn't even know what we were
doing,
talking about.
Right.
It's just like, we're just doing some 90 minutes or 2 hours of worship.
Yeah.
We had all these songs, and they were in varied forms of being finished or completion. And I loved it. Like, I actually loved the process of, kind of bringing the songs, even in the lead up weeks to it, just kind of they're still in process, and I don't know. To me, there's maybe some kind of metaphor in that for our own lives. Like like God doesn't wait for us to kind of have it all together before he wants us to play our part, you know, but we're kind of works in progress. And so I was like, hey, like this is a safe space for us just to kind of be ourselves. And I think there's so much we do. I mean, even at Hillsong Conference especially, because this, you know, everything is just kind of wired and perfect and to the dot. And it has to be that way because out of respect, I guess, for everybody's time and people and just everything that has to happen. But what I loved about Worship Conference and what we were doing there is we were free to break maybe some more rules or like to let it fly a little bit. And to just kind of, I think sometimes you have to just allow that space. And that's what we're really chasing after. Because I didn't really go into it with many expectations. We were just talking about this before, you know, like we were just talking about Louis' message this morning. And I think one of the things that can sometimes be a hindrance, there's a paradox in it, but expectations, you know, I think, you know, especially if you're growing up in any kind of faith environment, it's like, you know, like, what are you expecting? You know, what are you expectancy? You know, it's like this environment where God can move. And I totally see that. But there's also a side where expectancy can just be like a setup for disappointment, you know, or if you just kind of go, I don't know, maybe like to complacency or, you know, and I love that was challenged this morning. Like Louis started off and he just said, like, don't get used to this, you know, like don't. And that's the way I feel about everything. I don't ever want to get used to it. So when we went into that, I don't know, I didn't go with huge expectations. I just kind of knew that if we went in there and just kind of allow God to move, and we don't have to work it up too much sometimes. Like
100%.
You know, and so that was it. I don't really remember what happened, but I remember that we finished on the dot at midnight.
It was awesome,
and it was I can't remember what happened in the middle.
Me neither, really. Apart from it was great.
I mean, God
and obviously we captured the People album. And then since then, like obviously you've been touring that, but before that it got released and went around the world. For us at church though, I think that the songs have just been fresh and brought fresh life to congregation, to church, you know. And in that, there's some sort of authenticity that we captured on the night that's reverberated, or I don't know, kept going. Was that intentional at all?
Yeah, well, I think it comes back to, I mean, it's just timing. Like for me, I mean, there's obviously what was going on in my life. There's obviously what was going on, I think, in church at the time. There was, you know, sometimes, you know, there's seasons to everything. And you have to go through those seasons to appreciate, you know, like the season, you know, it's like the winter that makes the spring feel so nice, you know, and it's the summer that makes fall kind of like as well, like quite, you know, all there's beauty in all of it. And so I think church was an interesting season. And in the midst of that, because the church is made up of people, the people in the church, many of whom are going through a season where I feel like God is just stirring up something new and something fresh. So I just think the songs kind of came out of that. It just seemed like the right thing to do. And there wasn't too much thought into doing a live album, but naturally when you write a live album, because when you were writing a live album, there's more thought goes into, well, how are these songs going to translate live? And I think that was useful because Hillsong Worship obviously has been a live recording for so long. United moved into kind of doing studio albums, and I think United found its niche in kind of trying to find maybe songs that kind of push into the fringe a little bit more and connect with people in their iPod or elsewhere. Hopefully they can sing as well, but that was where it went. And it just seemed like with this one coming back to that live experience at home, the songs kind of were just formed around that kind of intention. And it's been amazing because, you know, we wrote the album obviously for church and whatnot, but we really wrote the album for the tour we just did. And so, you know, when we're writing these songs, I'm thinking, okay, just like imagining what people are going to sing, like, and we just experienced that, you know, and it was everything, and I can't even begin to explain it. It's just been amazing.
I want to, we'll talk more about that in a second. Before we get there, for you, which of the songs is the most meaningful?
For me, there's two. It'd be Highlands, which I wrote with Ben, and then As You Find Me. They sum up the journey that I'm so grateful for now, you know, but I certainly wasn't grateful for it in the minute. But I just see what God was doing, you know, and I've talked about this before elsewhere and so forth, but it's very clear to me now on the other side, you know, when you look back with some perspective, you just see what God needed to do some things. He needed to kind of break some things down and just clear out the path for this new thing I think he wanted to do. And so Highlands sums it up, and, you know, I think that lyric, I mean, it was really funny because I was writing it kind of around Psalm 24. And then Ben had kind of concepts around Psalm 23,
right.
and somehow we kind of managed
in the middle.
to meet in the middle.
Yeah.
And so you've got a song there that's kind of entrenched in Psalm 23, but journeys in Psalm 24. And to me, that was, I think, what was on Cass's heart, you know, with the conference as well, without really even knowing too much about it. But I was in the Highlands and I started singing these melodies and singing these words, and I can't even begin to explain it to you, but if you dive into those lyrics in either of those songs, there's a whole lot of flesh and blood in there, and a whole lot of God's grace kind of stitching it all together.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I love how, like, your journey is completely different to mine. But the way God, I guess, uses, say, those songs, and the concept of highs and lows, concepts of mountaintops and valleys, it's common to us all. So you are going through this whole thing, your own thing. You write a song that reflects that, and then that can then speak to me, and it can speak to, you know, people. And that's awesome to me, that God would do that.
I mean, that's the word of God, you know? Like, I mean, what I marvel at, I mean, I've got to be honest, like, I grew up in church. When you're young, you don't really get it, you know? Like, you kind of get the word of God at some surfacey kind of level, and maybe it gets you somewhere. And, you know, I remember the first time, you know, like, I started to understand the word of God, and I look at it now, and that's still the most foundational thing. Like, if I lose that and start diving into these depths, everything has to be there's a journey to it. So you build foundations that you know your faith is built on. But it's the same for everyone. Like the word of God, and it has to be that way. If the word is living and breathing, then surely it's living and breathing in a way that is real and meaningful to living, breathing people. Yeah, you know, and it 100%. Does that. And I just love that God can, you know, it's the same with anything. A preacher will preach the word of God. And it gets dissected a million different ways by a million different people who hear it, but in a way where God's able to use it to speak to them. And I think our songs, if they're entrenched or their foundation is the word of God, then they should be able to do the same thing.
Yeah, I'm with you. Which of the songs from the album was the hardest to write? I guess you can interpret that how you like.
Well, funnily enough, probably Good Grace. I think because it's something, it's been around for a long time. You know, I've been sitting on it for a long, long, long time. And it was a melody first song, you know, so it was...
Okay. Which is that question. Songs are you know, lyrical,
well, there's a melody and it's got a feeling attached to it. Right. And then you're trying to put words to it. Yeah. And it just was... I mean, you had a million different kind of versions that never felt right. And then where it landed, you know, I think it just seemed like when that came through, I didn't see it coming, you know, and here's a song we've been sitting on for maybe 10 years, you know, so it's like, and the timing was right for now. So that's the thing where I've learned as well with God, like the trusting, you know, it's like sometimes you get impatient and I've learned to know that if something's not going to work in this season, like, it's set up for a better season, you know?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So then you said you had that song for ages, at least melody. Lyric as well, concept? No, that's newer.
No, the Good Grace, like Good God, maybe that was a part of it for a while.
Yeah, right.
But it's funny because I think even then, like the Clean Hands, Pure Heart thing, you know, like that really kind of, it was in diving into Highlands, you know? Right. And that came out of it. And then Cass spoke it, and it was just right there in front of us. It was just, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like it was sitting there the whole time. And but yeah, that wasn't there. It's just, I wrote all kinds of lyrics, but the phrasing, if you actually take the melody, especially in the bridge, this, you know, it's a very strange melody format. It's not easy one to wrap words around because you don't know where the start of the sentence should be. Now it's obvious because we know it. Yeah. But I look at it now and I was like, oh my goodness, the sentence should start here,
Right.
you know, and then it made sense.
Right. So then, for you, are you writing things that are that God's speaking to you about, and sort of that come out of your own, obviously your own journey? There's some of that, but when you've got a blank canvas, going to write an album, like do you just have a repertoire of lessons God's taught me, or how do you find the stuff? Like how do you start?
Yeah, I mean, it's like how do you start anything? You know, I think. You got to trust God. Like, I have no idea. Like, I remember you sit there and you go, God, I don't know. Like, we'll have songs, like there's songs, but I'm talking about the content. Like, what are they going to say?
Right.
How are they going to translate? Like, it's more this journey of, I think in process, like I said, you put pen to paper, you know, and you start moving or just put some paint down.
Yeah.
And before you know it, you don't even know it. You look at it and go, oh my goodness, there's a picture forming here, you know, like actually this. And it's almost like a stream of consciousness thing, but I believe that God works through that. So it's like these songs, you know, like there's mysteries, there's these things that are too deep for understand, like these, you know, and we have these groanings, you know, they're too deep for words, and yet the whole concept, because it's actually a ridiculous concept to think that God would allow us to bring something that's going to bring Him praise, you know, like that like.
I get it.
What are we talking about?
Yeah.
Like, it's silly, you know, like it doesn't make any sense, but that's the beauty of God, and that's how He works. And so just like anything else in life, I think sometimes we feel like we have to look at everything and go, how everything has to be right, and then there'll be a perfect plan. And now, but God's like, the journey is not that. It's a pilgrimage. That's what Highlands is about. It's this journey of kind of like just putting one foot in front of the other and allowing His grace to lead us. He gives us a lamp unto our feet. You know what I mean? He doesn't give us the big spotlight view all the way down the road. It's the same with a song. And so as it forms, things start to piece together. And then you look at it and you go, man, like, I mean, hopefully at the end of it, you look back and go, man, like God was in this, because there's stuff there that like you can't even figure it out. Like I think about this little thing like Highlands, right? It kind of like, if you look at the melodies, it's like there's ascending. The chords are descending, the melody's ascending, and it keeps doing that. And then when the chords ascend, the melody descends,
which is
and
awesome.
Everything goes up and down. And it's all about the whole concept of the song is that we're on this ascent. Is not who could dare ascend this mountain of the Lord. You know, like it's not about, you know, it's only because He came down to us. And so it's that concept of the river. But it's written in the melody. Now that I didn't formulate. Ben didn't formulate any of that. Like that was. It's just
when did you realize that was there?
Thing. While writing it, yeah. But it was more when it just was there. But there's this subliminal spirit thing that obviously God's. I don't know. I don't think we're near smart enough to figure that out. But it happens. It happens with lots of songs, and like I said, for me, there's this feeling with a song, and then you just spend forever trying to. What's the right way of saying that? You know?
Yeah, which I've witnessed over and over, the struggle of the right lyric.
Yeah.
I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. When do you know when it's right? When do you go, that's it?
Honestly, when, like, I know it sounds funny, like, but when it feels right. I mean, we did, like, Whole Heart, for example. I had that song, again, for a while, gave it to Aiden to try and write lyrics for. And he wrote a ton of lyrics, and we spent a lot of time on that song. It just never felt right. We bought it. People sung it. We sung it at Creative, you know, like team night. We sung it a few other places. We sang it in church. People were like, that's great. And I'm just going, it's not right. It's just not right. It's not there. And the same thing, you know, you get to this point where very, very simple, but it was like that second pre-chorus just kind of landed. And to me, it just kind of tied the whole thing together.
Yeah.
And then it just felt right. And then even after we recorded it, I think we went back and edited what we had because I wanted to take out something because it felt too clunky.
Right.
So we took out we had a different pre-chorus as well. We took that out and sung the same pre-chorus twice in the first two verses. Doing that, it seems funny, but it just allows the journey of the song to kind of feel right when you want the bits to feel right. And it's not this thing that you necessarily craft. It's just like it's like, how does a painter know when to let a painting go? At some point you have to.
Yeah.
But there's also, sometimes you just got to put it on the shelf and look at it for a long time and go, I know it needs something more.
Yeah. There's a quote that art is it's not finished, it's abandoned, which I think is what you're describing. Hey?
Yeah, sure.
You just kind of,
I think it was Picasso,
something
like that.
Yes, I think it was too. Then does it surprise you? You write a song, you bring it to church. Does it surprise you still that people capture it and sing it and it goes far and wide?
I mean, there's always I like to think of these gift songs, like the songs that feel like gifts, the songs that feel like they're hard work and labor. But there's songs also that you just go, that's not us. Like, that's something, God, I'm just grateful that. Yeah. And those songs tend to be the ones that God breathes on. And then that blows your mind every single time, Yeah. And like I said before, the whole concept is ridiculous, that we even get to do this. And I found myself, I've never wanted to take anything for granted, not one bit. I've been passionate about that forever, but there's a new lease of gratitude that only comes sometimes, I guess, on the other side of something. Yeah. It's like if you have a moment where your life flashes before your eyes, or you nearly die, or all of a sudden you're like, my goodness, everything's beautiful. The traffic is beautiful. Right. People are beautiful. You're just grateful for things you're not normally grateful for. Yeah. And I think that's where we're at, for sure. Yeah, right.
Okay, so then you've been on this tour, 33 cities, probably more. Got some more coming. How is that different to what you've been doing in the past?
Just kind of like what I just said. I feel like, we took a break with United there. Yeah. For what ended up being about 18 months, And I think it's just the best thing that we could have done for everybody. So you come back into it fresh, new, just like that new kind of lease of life and gratitude. The decision for me on this, and we talked about it, it was just to really be present in each moment and see it for what it is, and realize, even calling the people tour, it's understanding that, it's about people. It actually, of course, it's about God, but it's about people, and every single story in this room matters to God. Every single person's journey. Yeah. We have this moment that is incredible that we get to be a part of something, and what we saw was exactly that. The buy-in was unbelievable, and the stories, the testimonies and the things we heard, and individual, every single night, just thing after thing, and you'd walk away from every night because the crowd becomes a blur. That's not it, It's the moments that happen that you take away. So all the takeaways for us are these, you talk about any space, any venue, and I'd be like, in this person, we met this person, or this, and it was treasuring those moments, and then also, realizing that in the midst of that, we got to, I don't know, I can't even explain it, bro. It was just amazing.
Obviously, lots and lots of people turned up and came and worshipped, but I've heard just little snippets, just individual stories that you've sent us, or that you see or hear from emails, and I love it that in amongst thousands of people, God's actually seeing the individual. Yeah. There's one story, I don't know if you'll remember it, was you were moving from the A stage to the B stage and encountered a guy with his family.
Yeah, do you want me to share it? Yeah. Okay, well, it was actually at Staples, so it was in LA. It's big, And so there's a moment in the night where we go from the A stage to the B stage, and what was cool about this was we just would walk through the crowd. So basically, we get the crowd singing stand. So they're all kind of singing stand, everyone's eyes closed, and then we just disappear off stage. So no one's leading it, don't have to, and we walk out. So, you walk through the crowd, and it's so funny because most people, and every now and then people will see you and they'll be like, hi, and so you shake their hand, and sometimes it feels awkward, but I'm like, why would that feel awkward? So I just give people hugs. I'd find a security guard and just whatever it was. And every now and then, like, so one time there was a guy, and he's just like standing there with his arms folded, like just looking. And it's like, I'll stand with him. So I just walked up to him and grabbed his arms and just put them in the air. And he's like, oh, hey, like just fun things like that. And every night it was different. Well, I'm walking along Staples Center. So you walk probably by about 200 or 300 people just on the right side and same on the left. And there's this guy and he's sitting down and he's on his phone. So I just kind of walked up to him as I'm walking out there, and I'm going, oh, what game are you playing? Like, because I just thought maybe he's playing a game on his phone. And he looks at me, and then he like kind of, he doesn't realise who,
he's not expecting
it. No, absolutely, he's not expecting it. Right. And then so I just kind of kept moving. So I was like, kept moving. Walked out, we did the B stage, we're out there for about 15 minutes. Then on the way back, So Will I's playing, and I'm walking back, and as I'm walking back, I just see this kid. He's like there's two kids, like probably 8 years old. And I think I can't remember if I was wearing a hat or not, but I was going to give this kid this hat. So then next thing I didn't realize that next to him is the same guy.
Right.
And he grabs me by the arm and he pulls me in, and I'm like, oh, like almost quite aggressively. And he says to me, because I just done a little talk, he's like, hey, what you just said, what? And then he just starts bursting into tears. So we just started hugging, and he's holding on me so tight. And then he says in my ear, and I wasn't sure if I heard him right at first, because he goes like, my wife and I think his daughter had just passed away. And he says, this is my son, his sister and his mum just passed away. That she was meant to be here tonight I think it was a boating accident. And I was like, I'm like, what on earth? We sat there and we prayed. I just prayed for him, and got back on stage. And I'm like, what was that? And I just thought, like how good is God? Like, because this is what you trust that he's doing. Like, and I talk about it every night. Yeah. But that he would have it that on the way up and on the way back. Like, I'm not saying I'm not going to. Surely that moment's not going to quench that grief, But at the very least, I felt like maybe it was just that God just wanted him and his son to know that, like, of all the people in the crowd, it was just the chances of that were crazy, and but there was things like that over and over again. It was wild.
I think it's great. I think it's great that God would allow you to walk that aisle and do that to that guy, and for the circumstances to be what they were. And I feel like that is, it's so easy to go, oh, but you're Joel Houston and you're on a big platform and you travel the world, and of course that would happen to you, but that happens to us all the time. As in, people are there and we have the opportunity to stop and interact. And I know for me, I would probably be a bit hesitant to do it. But I think when you hear those stories, it's like, no, God's moving all the time. We need to get on with it. So
I think there's I don't know, maybe it's just like we're older. Maybe I just don't care as much or whatever. But I just feel like the difference now, like sometimes you feel ashamed. Like you wouldn't want to talk to people because you don't want to look like you're in it for those reasons. Now I couldn't care less, man. Like it just feels so nice to be able to kind of, I think, and all of our guys feel this way, like the spirit amongst the team, like, you journey enough, you go through enough seasons, it's like the priorities that you always talk about, they just become cement. And it's such a beautiful place to live your life from, because you know where your value is, or you know what really matters. Yeah. And I pray we can hold on to that, because again, life is seasons, it's repetitive, but His grace is repetitive too. So it's been really cool for us.
So the tour is sort of almost done. You got a few more cities. A few more cities in the States, and then South America, and who knows where from then. But,
there's a whole world out there. There's a lot of people in the world.
There's a lot of people. You're right. Hey, it's gone too fast. I wish we could speak longer. Thanks heaps for coming, for chatting with me. I want to encourage you, because the lows, the highs, it's all worth it, hey?
Yeah, bro.
Yeah.
It's the journey.
Yeah, so if you're watching or listening out there, keep going. God will use you. We're all people, and there's heaps of people to reach, so who knows, hey? Yeah.
Cheers.
Amen. It's always a blast talking to Joel. He's so obviously at the forefront of what is happening in church music, in worship music, and man, I enjoyed hearing his perspective, and I hope you did too. Hey, if you want to keep up or find out what's happening with United and what's coming up with them, go to the website hillsong.com/United. So next up, we've got today's Q&A. So we're answering some of your questions. Let's jump straight into it. So I'm here with Cass, and our question for today is this. How do you combine creativity and leadership when you feel like maybe they're two separate things in your life?
All right, that is an interesting question. I feel like you have dealt with a number of our staff where you've had these conversations. So why don't you start with this one?
Turning the tables.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I guess I've spoken with lots of people over the years. People who've attended our worship and creative conference have asked me about this question because I think really what's at the heart of it is someone's an artist, a creative. They want to be creating, but they find themselves in a leadership position, which means they're not doing the thing that they actually love to do. They're leading people who do the thing that they love to do.
Right.
And so there can be a sense of missing out. And I guess that in that, I think that we have to find outlets for the things that we love to do. And so from that perspective, it might be that we continue to be creative or to be artistic and find an avenue for that is not within the sort of boundaries of church leadership or team leadership. So not letting go of the creativity, holding on to that, doing that, but keeping it separate, and then making sure that we're leading and inspiring our team. The reason I say that is because I think sometimes we need to be, as leaders, pushing the boundaries of our creativity and really maybe even exemplifying what we're looking for from our creatives. So as a musician, instead of stopping playing music in your spare time, perhaps even pushing that and really investing into that so that you can show the team what it is you're looking for. Sometimes there's an occasion where you might have to lay it down. Just time-wise, you might physically not be able to do both. But on the whole, I think that if you're doing something that you love, then you should continue doing that and also steward the leadership that God's put in your hand. Now, having said that, sometimes people are artists and they're not really meant to be leaders. We see that in our environment where people can play an instrument or they can do a particular task better than anybody else, and the leadership side of things is sort of secondary. They're not really skilled at that, and perhaps never will be. And so I think I guess for us looking at our team, we need to be careful that we don't put people in the leadership positions just because they can do a task. Just because they're a great, guitarist, let's say, doesn't mean they'll be a great leader. So when we're making those decisions, we need to look at where people's skill sets really lie and allow them to shine in that. So I'm not sure if that answered the question. Do you have anything you wanted to add? But
maybe only that I think leadership can actually be one of the most creative things that you do.
Yes.
So potentially, with a little bit of a perspective change, communicating is an incredibly creative exercise, and putting people into the right roles is incredibly creative, and thinking of different ways and alternative ways to do things, creative. And so maybe it doesn't have to be so disconnected. They could actually come together if you just think a little bit differently about what leadership is.
Yes, 100% agree. Going on what you said, though, From a leadership perspective, if you see yourself as creative and a leader, then you can combine the two. And then it's about really bringing creativity to the leadership, which is what you're saying, but working out ways to outwork that in everyday life. So when it comes to speaking, if you're speaking to your team, then how can that be a creative endeavor as opposed to just seeing it as speaking to the team?
Right, because I think creativity makes you feel something. And so often when you lead, you want people that you lead to feel, to engage and to remember and to be moved by what you're talking about. So I think if we think a little bit differently about all of those things, it's going to help our teams to get better. A few years ago, you spoke on overcoming fears.
Okay.
And Maddie has a question on any advice on how to not let fear hold you back.
Yeah, I think that's a good question because I think we all face fear from time to time. And even though we may not call it that or we may not acknowledge it, we avoid certain situations or we don't put ourselves in places where someone might confront us, or there's all sorts of ways that fear might hold us back. So
like when you look down at a prayer meeting hoping that nobody will ask you to pray?
Yeah, for example.
Right.
Yeah, you, exactly that. Or when you're in a meeting and someone looks to you to speak about something, and then you point to somebody else who can speak about it or whatnot. I think they're all little areas of anxiety or of fear and places where they're holding us back. When it comes to our lives and stepping into all God has for us, I think that as creatives, we have fear can be a trigger to imagination. So I think often what we're doing by having fear is that we're imagining a future that's negative.
Right.
We look at the Bible and God says He's with us. He says He's got big plans for us. He says He's got a future. He's got us in the palm of His hands, and He's got a great future for us. And yet we imagine the opposite. We imagine that we're going to step out and fail, or if people are like me, at least, we imagine that things might go negatively. But instead, I think that we can, when we feel the sense of fear or we have a sense of anxiety about the future, we can stop, use it as a trigger point to then reimagine. Okay, I think this might happen, but imagine it doesn't. Imagine as God is true to His word and He's going to come through for us. Imagine that the future is bright and hopeful and good and not negative.
Right.
And I found that helps.
Okay, I love that. But what when your experience tells you can't do something? So you've actually failed. And now you've got to step back into that space and go again. Because I think I watch that most weekends with worship leaders or musicians or people in different areas where they had a rough week the week before, and fear almost takes them out of doing what they feel called to do again.
Yeah, I think that's a great question too, which is there's so many answers to that, right? But one might be to have people in your life that you can go to and work with on assessing why it is that thing went wrong.
Yep.
And is it because I'm actually not meant to be doing it, or is it because I just had a bad day, or I need to work on a certain area? I
can remember the first time I had to speak, and I'd never spoken in church before. Yeah. And it was a Mother's Day morning. Mm-hmm. There's maybe 3,500 people in an auditorium. I don't think I'd ever even used a microphone before.
Yep.
And I felt that feeling of fear and anxiety of failing in front of a lot of people. I can remember going to see Robert Ferguson, who's our teaching pastor, and he really, really simply took me into the auditorium, made the CT production team turn on the microphones and made me stand on the stage with the microphone and actually begin to practice. And I think often that's the basic stuff that helps you to overcome fear is getting some flight time and some practice and somebody older and more mature and more seasoned who goes, okay, you're imagining the worst, like you said. Now let me help you to imagine how this actually plays out, like the facts of it.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think maybe in some occasions, fear is a bit of a pride thing for some people, as in we thought we could do it and then it turns out we can't do it. And so then we're fearful of actually doing it. We question ourselves. And it could be as simple as rehearsing more. Right. It could be as simple as actually practicing a little bit more, maybe watching back that time you spoke or that time you led or whatever. And
which is awful, by the way.
100% it's awful. But facing the reality. They say that great leaders need to be self-aware leaders, a little bit maybe self-obsessed, so that we're looking at ourselves to go, what is it about me that I need to improve or grow in or change in order to do all that God has for me to do? Sometimes we don't want to do that because we're fearful of what we might find, but it's facing that and head on and changing the things we need to change and growing in the areas we need to grow in.
And I think most of our team, when you talk to them, would often say that they do what they do afraid. So the fear never leaves, but the trust grows in God's ability to actually come through. Yeah. And so they get up on platforms and they lead and they do all sorts of stuff, still with butterflies in their stomachs, but somewhere, if they just keep going, they get over it, they realise that it's about other people, not about themselves, and then they step into that space. Yeah. And the reality is, just to wrap up, I guess the reality is that if God is asking us to do stuff like He asked the people in the Bible to do, like no one wanted to do it because they knew they couldn't do it on their own. They needed God to come through. They needed Him to be with them. And I think as soon as we think we can do whatever it is we have in front of us on our own, we're in the wrong spot. Yeah. So it's a bit of a tricky thing where we need to sort of
sort of push through fear and do things even though we're fearful, but then also not be so arrogant to think that we can achieve all that God would have us do on our own. We need to actually, and if we can, then obviously we don't have a big enough vision of what God might have us do. So we need to actually have that balance right and get a good vision, but also push through when fear kind of rises up. That's it for today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it and it's been useful for your journey. If you haven't already, I'd love to take a minute just to encourage you to subscribe. When you do that, you become part of our growing community of creatives who are trying their best to live out their faith through their creativity. So join us anywhere you find your podcasts, subscribe, and then you won't miss out on anything. And I always love to hear from you, so please write us a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. It helps with the visibility of the podcast and it lets us know what you think, what you're enjoying, and where we can go with the podcast in the future. Aside from that, you can write to me on Twitter @RichLangton, and we'll talk to you next time.